What was accomplished by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit here to Washington to meet with President Trump at the White House this week? It was a very interesting set of meetings, actually. Netanyahu having a long working dinner with Trump on Monday night, and then a extended meeting added to the schedule on Tuesday, something that was not on the schedule, where Trump and Netanyahu went in much more depth. Now, there weren't big announcements here at the White House, but the fact that Netanyahu was even invited to come to the White House for the third time since Trump took office just 5 months ago, this was a big deal. Some of this was just the optics of two leaders that took decisive action to destroy Iran's nuclear threat and destroy Iran's nuclear infrastructure and industry. This is the first time these two leaders have met since that dramatic action just a few weeks ago. It's also important to note that President Biden never invited Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House during the entire 4 years of the Biden administration. Biden really kept Netanyahu in the doghouse, as it were, frustrated with Netanyahu because he wouldn't make a two-state solution and all kinds of other reasons. But I came to the White House, I came to Washington to kind of watch what was happening between Trump and Netanyahu, and I think the optics are very important. It is interesting that for several days of talks between those two top leaders, in addition, Netanyahu met with Vice President J.D. Vance, he met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he met with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, he met with all kinds of other senior officials, and of course with senior congressional leaders. All of that didn't lead to any major announcement. And I think that's the big news out of this week, is that there wasn't any big news yet. But there are several things cooking. And I think the fact that this wasn't a normal visit, this was Trump and Bibi getting together after the most historic moment of U.S.-Israeli military cooperation in history, right? Destroying Iran's nuclear threat in a way that nobody thought Trump would really do it. Nobody thought Netanyahu would really do it, though both had warned that this was possible in increasingly strong terms leading up to the attack itself. Trump gave Iran's leadership every opportunity to make a deal. He gave them 60 days to make a deal. And when they didn't make a deal on day 61, Trump gave Netanyahu the green light, go attack. If you want to attack, now's the moment. And I think nobody, myself included, believed that when Trump had given a 60-day window, that he literally meant there was no wiggle room. At day 61, the attack would come. And that caught everybody off guard, most of all the Iranian regime, and history was made. And I'm very grateful to President Trump for making that courageous decision when so many in his administration, in his inner circle, as well as those outside voices that Trump listens to and appreciates and respects and even likes, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, and others, were telling Trump, do not attack Iran under any circumstances. You're just drawing us into a war. You're just doing this for the Israelis. Why would we do that? Trump listened and then ignored all that advice. And I think these are big moments. And so for Trump and Netanyahu to have some time just to sit together, not to make dramatic announcements, to sit, to talk, assess what have we accomplished and where are we going next. To me, that's the big development here. And it's not normal for an Israeli prime minister not to have a formal Oval Office press moment or something, a big press conference in the East Wing with the president. But the key is to understand is Netanyahu and Trump don't have anything to announce right now. What they're doing is assessing what they've just accomplished and trying to lay the groundwork for what they want to accomplish and make sure they're on the same page. That's really important. You can't really accomplish that over Zoom, no matter how secure the White House communication system can put it together. You have to sit together. And so they sat together here at the White House for many, many hours. What were the big topics that they are trying to assess? First, how much damage was really done to the Iran nuclear program, and the consensus emerging from a lot of leaks is significant damage, maybe not forever and ever and ever. There might need to be more attacks in the future if Iran tries to start reconstituting its nuclear program. And so one question, and we don't have an answer yet, is Netanyahu is almost certainly asking Trump, can I have a green light? Can I have a authorization that if Israeli intelligence detects Iran trying to reconstitute either its ballistic missile program or, more importantly, its nuclear weapons program, that Israel has the freedom of action to attack? That's a big deal. We don't know if Trump gave that. Trump has indicated publicly he does not want to have to use U.S. or Israeli military action. What he wants is a deal. He wants a deal with Iran. So one question is how much damage was done. The second big question was where are the U.S. and Israel in terms of if we had to use military force, under what circumstances, how would that work, how would we integrate? The third question is, could there be a deal with the Iranian regime? Now, on that topic, again, while we don't have any formal announcements in any way, we know that Trump wants Steve Witkoff, his senior envoy, to go and meet with the Iranians somewhere and start a conversation. Could be soon, in the next week or two. This makes Netanyahu nervous. Netanyahu and his team does not want to see. He doesn't want to tell Trump no. But Netanyahu doesn't believe the Iranian regime wants anything good, or that they have been humbled by this enough to surrender, right? What Netanyahu wants is regime change in Iran. He wants this wicked regime led by so-called Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to fall. I want that as well. You should want that as well. The key is that President Trump and Netanyahu have not formally made regime change in Iran their policies. And I want to be clear about this because I remember what then Secretary of State Colin Powell said when President George W. Bush was considering invading Iraq to remove Saddam Hussein from power and create regime change. Colin Powell kept referencing what he called the Pottery Barn rule. You break it, you own it. And that turned out to be wise counsel that maybe George W. Bush didn't fully absorb and accept. But Bush went into Iraq. Iraq was broken, and it's taken a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of American lives lost in Iraq, and we still don't have what we want now that the United States is gone. So this is a big question. Trump would love to see the Iranian regime gone. Netanyahu even more wants the Iranian regime gone, but neither want to institute policies. They certainly aren't going to invade. They're not going to put boots on the ground. They're not going to do what the United States did in Iraq or Afghanistan, okay? That's not in the cards. What is in the cards is, can we take a series of actions that weaken the Iranian regime and make it more likely for a coup d'etat, the regime to fall, the supreme leader to get on a plane and flee to Moscow the way the demon of Damascus, then Syrian President Bashar al-Assad did in the middle of the night and escaped, and his regime fell in last December of 24. All good, or a massive civil uprising by the Iranian people, or an uprising by the Iranian military. There's a lot of options. So the question would be, how could Trump, Netanyahu, the United States, and Israel create the conditions to bring about the end of the wicked regime in Iran and bring about the rise of moderate, pro-Western, pro-American, even pro-Israel exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi. How could someone like him be positioned to take over and lead a future Iran? All big questions, important questions that Trump and Netanyahu have been discussing. What's the future of Iran? What's the future we want for Iran? How do we get there? But what's making Netanyahu nervous, and honestly is making me nervous, is this question. Why does Trump keep saying he wants a deal with Iran? Why does Trump keep saying he's willing to remove all the, or most, or many of the economic sanctions that have put Iran's leadership in such a crippling, difficult, compromised position? Why remove those sanctions while that regime is still in power? Trump would say, well, if they make a deal that they promise never to reconstitute the nuclear program or the ballistic missile program, and we can verify that, then that's worth it to lift the sanctions as a reward. Netanyahu doesn't want to tell Trump no, but he is nervous about this. Okay? He's nervous. Why? Because he doesn't want to see hundreds of billions of dollars get injected into the Iranian economy and thus into the coffers of their wicked, evil genocidal Iranian regime. He doesn't want to see it because that's just going to prop up a regime that wants to commit genocide, that wants to wipe Israel off the map, that wants to bring down the United States, right? Death to Israel, death to America. So Netanyahu's walking a fine line with Trump, not wanting to publicly disagree with him, but also being very uncomfortable. And almost certainly, if we were in those rooms, we would hear Netanyahu saying, okay, that's an option, but maybe what about this, right? So those are big questions that Trump and Netanyahu were talking about. There was another big question here that I haven't even gotten to yet, so let's take a moment on that. The hostages, the 50 hostages that are still in Gaza, still held by Hamas, and the future of the war in Gaza. Israelis are losing soldiers. Israeli soldiers are being killed. They're being wounded. The Israeli military is getting tired. The Israeli society is getting tired. We want our hostages back. We're worried that the 50 hostages, about which we believe there's about 24 or so that are alive, that they're not going to make it that much longer. So there is a deal on the table. Steve Witkoff, President Trump's senior envoy, has put on a deal on the table in which there would be a 60-day ceasefire, during which Hamas would release 8 Israeli hostages up front, 2 more at the end of 60 days, and every few days, more dead Israeli bodies, the bodies of dead Israeli hostages, would be released. And then during those 60 days, discussions would continue about getting the rest of the hostages out and maybe bringing the war to an end. Netanyahu, what is his objective? Yes, he wants to get all the hostages back, but he doesn't want Iran's key proxy, Hamas, to be able to reconstitute itself, come up out of the tunnels after the war is over and say, we won, we defeated, the Satan Israel. Netanyahu does not want, after all this time, to almost 2 years, to allow Hamas to have any evidence that they could claim victory. But I do believe that Netanyahu wants to bring an end to this war. He wants the hostages out, and he believes we're getting close. So we believe that that was a big element in the conversations between Trump and Netanyahu. What's the right way to end this war and achieve victory, and then move on to the next set of questions that Trump and Netanyahu want to accomplish together? How do we make a peace and normalization deal with Saudi Arabia? How do we make a peace and normalization deal with Lebanon? How do we make a peace and normalization deal with Indonesia and other Arab Muslim countries? How do we get Syria to move towards the maybe not pro-American, pro-Israel camp, but at least not be a threat in the future? These are big questions, and they required lots of time. Not on Zoom, not on Skype. They required lots of time together. Trump, Netanyahu, their senior advisors, political, diplomatic, military, thinking through a lot of options and trying to get on the exact same page together. And that's why we didn't see big announcements. This was a rare moment where this trip wasn't designed to provide announcements unless unless there was some breakthrough that they could announce, like a hostage deal. That would have been great. That may be coming still in the hours and days ahead. I hope it is, and we should be praying for that. But I think what we watched this last few days here at the White House was an opportunity for the 2 most consequential leaders on the planet right now, who are the 2 closest allies on the planet right now, talking about what did we accomplish and where are we going. From the White House here in Washington, this is Joel Rosenberg for All Israel News.